All right, I'm going to go ahead and start off with the drums. I did the composition first, technically, but even then I did start with some basic drums. So these are the foundation of your song, so you want to make sure you're getting them right. And they'll kind of set the tone for how everything else goes. So let me go ahead and solo all of these. And that is everything layered all at once. So obviously there will be fewer layers at different points in the song. So first of all, the kick. This is a custom kick that I modified myself. So this is included in the sample pack that came with this tutorial. And this is tuned to be within the key of the song. I believe in this case we are in F sharp. F tends to be a really common key for electronic music to be in, so F sharp's kind of around that range because the bass tends to hit at a really nice spot. Your sub bass and your kick can tend to have this nice punch at around that key. And the reason this kick is tuned to be within the key of the song is because it has this tail to it. You hear that sub, especially at the end, and basically what you want, and I'll dive into the bass just a little bit to show you, your kick and your bass really need to mesh well together. If they don't, everything really falls apart. They're your foundation, and you want to keep them from kind of fighting. So one way to accomplish that is to tune the kick to be within the key of the song, and this is very common for house and trance and whatnot, where your kicks are very long and very bassy. Other genres like D&B or dubstep have shorter kicks, and often they don't need to be tuned to be within the key of the song because you're not worrying about that sub because they're short enough to kind of get away with whatever. But with this, it really helps a lot in terms of the cohesion. And another thing I have on top of that is Lfo Tool, in this case serving as an envelope shaper, and this could also be accomplished with any other envelope shaper or even with a crossfade if you were just to use a sample instead of an instance of Ultrabeat like I have here. Which, by the way, all Ultrabeat is doing, it's just holding the sample and allowing me to put in MIDI notes with that sample. So Lfo Tool, I'll take it off. Let me get rid of this bass here. This is the original kick. It's a little longer. So you can hear how that gets shorter. Get rid of that tail, because if I take this off and then add it back on, it improves that clarity, kind of removes some of that mud. There's less low end interacting. And also on this kick, I have a decent bit of EQ. I'll take that off now. So getting rid of some mid-range where it sounded a little boxy, and then getting rid of some top end, so that enhances its kind of beefiness. So then rather than go and boost the bass, I'm actually subtracting that information because I don't need it in the first place, and that allows the low end to shine through better. So you got this nice punchy kick with this tail that's not too long, but long enough to get that sub across with the bass there. And then on top of that, I've got a couple of claps, well, a clap and a snare. So let me go into each of these individually. So we got the snare first of all. And the thing about both the clap and the snare is that they have both been shifted a little bit ahead of the kick. So if I zoom way in here, you can actually see that's just a little ahead. So if I play them together, that transient of that snare hits just a tiny bit before the kick. And that's even more extreme with the clap. So essentially what you get is this kind of cascading effect. And this serves a couple of purposes. For one thing, it pushes the energy of the track. When something's a little ahead of the beat, it kind of increases this urgency. This is a very common technique used in progressive house and genres like it to increase the energy and kind of that bounce. And then also, like I said, the cascading effect kind of creates this more human feel, which is very pleasing to the ear. And then the reason I'm using both a clap and a snare is one is providing punch and the other is providing top end and kind of that snap. That and this is a fair amount of low end rolled off. and that really sharp kind of upper mid-range. The extra low end there was just kind of creating some mud, so we don't need it there because the kick is providing the low end already. No need for the snare to also provide low end. And once again, that'll be different for different genres. Dubstep, you might have a bassier snare, but for this, the kick is going constantly, so. All right, so once that's solid, we can solo that with the bass. And so far, that sounded solid, so we'll continue building. So let's go on to our closed hi-hats. So this one here is a very basic closed hi-hat. A little bit of EQ. There we go. Bring out a little clarity. And then these offbeat hi-hats. Essentially, this is 3 different hi-hats in Ultrabeat, and they have a significant amount of swing on them. And I think 2 of them have been pitched up a little bit. So this almost has a bit of an open hi-hat feel, whereas these are all completely closed. And coming up with that pattern was a lot of just kind of playing around, getting a sense for what I was going for. But this is a pretty standard progressive house pattern. And I mentioned swing. I will be coming back to this frequently because one of the differences between kind of this melodic progressive house and something like a melodic trance track is the amount of swing. Something like trance would have a lot more just pure melody and emotion and this kind of euphoric feel, whereas a lot of house is really dependent on the groove and the swing. So that's why I have a lot of swing going on here. When programming the drums, I knew kind of the amount of swing I wanted and was able to use this as kind of a way of setting that by ear. And once I had a level of swing I was happy with, I just matched everything else to it. So. And then beyond that, we got some open hats. And these are pretty simple. A real hi-hat, and then this white noise-based open hi-hat with some reverb on it. And I also have Lfo Tool on both of these, and that's once again serving to get rid of some information that doesn't need to be there. In this case, the hi-hat rings out a bit too much, so to tame that, I just turn this part down versus... And then in the case of this one, its sustain was even longer. If I take off Lfo Tool, I need something short and punchy that would kind of be able to fade into the background. So what I did was essentially re-enveloped the drum in its entirety and have this nice smooth fade out, which once again you could do with a regular crossfade, but I'm lazy, so I used Lfo Tool. So those are pretty much all the drums used in the entire song. I do have that little drum fill that I'll get to during arrangement. It's fairly simple. But to sum up, the big keys to getting these drums right were making sure nothing interfered with anything else, and that shows up both in the pitch and the lengths of the drums, and also building drums with the rest of the song in mind. For instance, making sure the kick and the bass work well together, making sure that the swing is kind of where I want it to be for the entire song, and making sure I have enough drums for various energy levels, and making sure they sound good, more stripped back, and more layered. So, for instance, right here, that's perfectly usable by itself for a section of a song. Then if I want to raise the energy level by 1 notch, that does it right away. Brings in that extra top end, brings in that extra excitement, that extra groove. And then if I want to raise it by another notch, I can add in the open hi-hats. So that's really it for the drums. In the next video, I'm going to dive a bit into the composition, so I will see you guys in the next video.